Well, welcome, ladies and gentlemen. It's like Comedy Central. The Democrats fighting each other. Mike Bloomberg got a big beat down in Las Vegas last night. The 5 other candidates ganging up on the new guy, as well as tearing into each other. So who emerged from this brutal brawl? Jenna Browder has the answer.
The gloves came off quickly last night in Nevada. The Democratic candidates wasting no time going after newcomer Michael Bloomberg.
I'd like to talk about who we're running against. A billionaire who calls women fat broads and horse-faced lesbians. And no, I'm not talking about Donald Trump. I'm talking about Mayor Bloomberg.
The billionaire who spent millions of his own dollars on campaign ads, hitting back and training his focus on President Trump.
I'm a New Yorker. I know how to take on an arrogant con man like Donald Trump.
Bloomberg apologized for the controversial policy known as stop and frisk, which he defended as New York's mayor.
I've sat, I've apologized, I've asked for forgiveness. There is no great answer to a lot of these problems. And if we took off everybody that was wrong on off this panel, everybody that was wrong on criminal justice at some time in their careers, there'd be nobody else up here.
He also took hits over alleged discriminatory and sexist comments made to women who worked for him.
We are not going to beat Donald Trump with a man who has who knows how many non-disclosure agreements and the drip, drip, drip of stories of women saying they have been harassed and discriminated against. That's not what we do as Democrats.
It's easy. All the mayor has to do is say, you are released from the non-disclosure agreement, period.
The frontrunner Bernie Sanders, who's surging in national polls, also fielded a fair amount of attacks. The candidate forced to defend his socialist health care and economic policies.
I believe in democratic socialism for working people, not billionaires. Health care for all.
You don't start out by saying, I've got 160 million people. I'm going to take away the insurance plan that they love.
Pete Buttigieg taking it to both the frontrunner and the newcomer.
Let's put forward somebody who's actually a Democrat. Look, we shouldn't have to choose between one candidate who wants to burn this party down and another candidate who wants to buy this party out.
The former South Bend, Indiana mayor clashed several times with Amy Klobuchar, once for not knowing the name of Mexico's president.
Are you trying to say that I'm dumb, or are you mocking me here, Pete?
I'm saying that you shouldn't trivialize
I made an error.
And former Vice President Joe Biden, who's slipping in the polls, spent the night defending his record.
I'm the only one on this stage that's actually got anything done on health care, okay?
The Nevada caucus is Saturday, but early voting is already underway. From there, the candidates will head to South Carolina for that state's primary and another debate. Jenna Browder, CBN News.
Well, Chief Political Analyst David Brody is here with us to take the free-for-all. David, what do you think? Bloomberg was surging, but it looks like they took him down pretty good last night, didn't they?
Pat, it was a horrible night for Michael Bloomberg. As a matter of fact, I think he's still trying to get the license plate of what hit him. And by the way, I think it has a Massachusetts plate, and it's EWARREN. Elizabeth Warren was just, I mean, it was nasty. And he sat there. Pat, he sat there. He didn't say a word. She just let him have it on non-disclosure agreements, as Jenna was talking about there, and stop and frisk, and I can go on and on. He looked stiff. It just didn't work at all. And I think what we're finding out is those ads, those hundreds of millions of dollars in ads, have been very effective to get him to this point. But he's better in the ads than he was on the debate stage, and the curtain was kind of peeled back last night, and it was not a good night at all for Bloomberg.
David, who do they have? They say this debate, the winner was Trump. Who can they emerge with a candidate?
Pat, that is a great question. So let me give you the answer, because here's who's leading right now in terms of getting the majority of delegates. No one. And what I mean by that is that you need 1,991 delegates to get a majority of the Democrat delegates before the convention, and no one is on pace to do it. Bernie's the leader. Right now, he's projected maybe, if it continues to be this way, about 1,500, 1,600 delegates. He'll come up a couple hundred delegates short. So that's why the answer is no one. And that is bad news for Bernie, because if Bernie doesn't win on that first ballot, in other words, if he doesn't have a majority of delegates, well, you know the deal, Pat. We're going to a second ballot, and that's where, excuse me, that's where superdelegates come into play. And that's why that last question in the debate was so important, because Bernie talked about those 500 superdelegates. Well, guess what? They will have a say on that second ballot. And everybody's saying, wait a minute, superdelegates, what does that mean? Look, superdelegates pretty much are the party establishment. They're the senators, the congressmen. These are the folks that don't want Bernie. So Bernie does not want to get to a second ballot, because then he's going to lose the nomination to whoever that alternative is to Bernie. So we are fluid here, Pat, and it's all good news for Trump, because they're going to just keep bashing on each other for a while here.
You've got the survivors are either Klobuchar or Buttigieg. I don't think Joe Biden is in the race any longer, is he?
No, I think Joe Biden has pretty much dropped off at this point. What I mean by that, if you look at the African-American support in South Carolina, that is dropping quickly. And, of course, South Carolina is a week from Saturday, Nevada coming up on Saturday. And so he's got some problems. And the good news for Joe Biden last night was that was his best debate by far. Here's the bad news. It came 9 months too late. I mean, he needed to do something much earlier. So, look, I think at this point, you know, Joe Biden could be in that 200 to 300, 400 delegate area. In other words, he could win a few hundred delegates, but that's not going to do him, as they say, a hill of beans. And so at some point, there's a delegate math problem, not just for Bernie, because he may not be able to get there, but also for some of those left candidates that are to the right of Bernie. They're still left, but they're to the right of Bernie. They're going to need to figure out Buttigieg, Klobuchar, Biden, Bloomberg, Warren. I don't put Warren so much in that group, but they're going to need to figure out who's going to be that alternative to Bernie, because at some point it's a delegate math situation, and you have to have a binary choice going forward.
Let me ask you something. You know, Nancy Pelosi is trying to act as if the stock market really isn't doing what it's doing. But people with their 401ks and other retirement portfolios are doing exceptionally well. The market is just roaring along despite coronavirus and all these other things. I mean, most people are looking at a pretty fat paycheck. What are Democrats going to do to counter that?
Well, there's not much they can do. They are trying to trot out the Obama line. In other words, they're trying to basically say that, look, this all started under Barack Obama, and he needs to get some of the credit here. And then you can insert the laugh emoji at that point, because, you know, give me a break. I mean, are we going to give FDR credit for something that happened 85 years ago? Look, I mean, at some point, it kind of gets ridiculous. And the truth of the matter is, Donald Trump will be a president running for a second term with a roaring economy. You just typically don't lose when you're running for re-election with a great economy, and we're not at war. When I say we're not at war, we're not in any sort of, you know, active war that's kind of a Vietnam situation and taking down the country in that sense. So, look, he's got it all teed up for him. Here's the problem. There's something called Twitter, and there's something called Donald Trump, and there's something called foot and mouth disease. And so, you know, if he can kind of figure it out, good luck with that. He's his own worst enemy. So we'll see. But at this point, on paper, he should be reelected. But the problem is on paper for him.
David, thanks for your insights. David Brody.
You bet.
Well, in other news, the warm winter weather in Virginia is coming to an end. Snow is heading our way. How much? Well, John Jessup has more on the weather, not only in Virginia, but on the East Coast.
That's right, Pat. It's all part of a storm that will bring snow to southeastern Virginia, including the Tidewater area and parts of North Carolina. A system carrying heavy rain will collide with a blast of cold air from the north. The afternoon snow expected to continue through the night. Our CBN colleagues down in Virginia Beach could wake up to 3 to 6 inches of snow in the morning. While a sharp drop in the number of new coronavirus cases in China might be linked to yet another change in the way officials categorize infections. China's Health Commission announced 394 new cases in the previous 24 hours. That's sharply down from the 5 previous days, where numbers range between 1,600 and 2,100 new cases a day. It is the second time in a week China changed its criteria for new cases. In South Korea, the mayor of a city of 2.5 million people wants citizens to avoid going outside after a spike in new cases there. Daegu in the southeast reported 35 new coronavirus infections. Many of the victims attended church services where a previously infected person was present. Well, California Governor Gavin Newsom is decrying the state's homeless crisis, dedicating his annual State of the State address Wednesday entirely to the problem. The Democratic governor calling it a disgrace that the richest state in the nation can't house and help so many of its citizens. As CBN News recently reported, some 140,000 people are living on the streets of California. That's about a quarter of the total number of homeless in America. In Los Angeles, 10 cities on the streets filled with garbage and human waste are attracting huge numbers of rats carrying germs and disease into nearby public buildings. Governor Newsom pledged to provide more trailers to get the homeless off the streets and to help the mentally ill get the treatment they need. President Trump, Pat, has been a vocal critic of California's inability to deal with the crisis.
Well, there was an old saying that I used to remember: you get more of what you subsidize and you get less of what you tax. So what the people of California don't have is regulations. They have less of them, and they have more benefits. They're giving free services to illegal immigrants. They're keeping ICE from pursuing people who are criminals into sanctuary cities. They're giving amazing benefits to illegal people, and they in turn are preventing ICE from going into what they call sanctuary cities. Well, they're getting more of it. And there's one thing that, is a court mandated problem, and that was when the court said you cannot incarcerate mentally ill people. Well, that's nice. Well, what are you going to do if you don't incarcerate them? Well, you're going to turn them loose, and hopefully the social services and the medical health professionals will take over. Well, they haven't. And so we have thousands of people wandering our streets who are mentally ill, who should be in mental health treatment facilities. Instead of that, because of court rulings, they've been turned loose. And so it's not just California, it's major cities all over America where the numbers of homeless are just staggering. But California seems to be the epicenter, and it is an absolute disgrace. Used condoms, needles, all kinds of human waste on the streets. The most beautiful cities in America being turned into garbage dumps because of poor public policy. And it's, it isn't enough to say, well, it's the fault of the federal government. It's your fault. Get your act together and watch what will happen.